the second hour of our program. On the line with us is our buddy David Pepper, the lawyer, writer. His latest book is Saving Democracy, a user's manual for every American. Pattern, preserving power at all costs. This is a pretty shocking series of stories you're telling about what's going on in Ohio, but I think the meta story is even more shocking, which is that, you know, people who use democratic means, small d democratic means to get elected, then are explicitly trying to violate the basic tenets of democracy in order to stay in power.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is the more I write this stuff, the more, you know, January 6th, as over the top as it was an attempt to deny an election result. And it was outrageous to most Americans. But at a micro level, in states, as I try and describe in that one newsletter, we see this all the time. You know, back in 2018, Missouri voters, for example, they voted for Medicaid expansion. They voted to end gerrymandering. The legislature simply ignored them. And the examples I provided in this Substack post you mentioned, we had an election for the state school board. And Democratic candidates who believe in public schools won 3 races. They flipped the elected majority of that state school board. But just like Jim Crow did in the 50s, our governor immediately stripped the power away from that state school board. We had an election about pensions, the state teachers' retirement pension. The teacher retirees are frustrated. They don't think there's enough transparency. The returns aren't that good. They elected a quote-unquote reformer to start asking more questions. Well, on the moment that reformer won, the governor fired another reformer from the board to undo the result of that election. And so I could go on. That also happened with our Supreme Court elections in other states. So my guess is anyone looking closely at many of these red states will see what I'm showing in Ohio, that on these more micro level bodies of government that have massive power that no one knows about, that control large amounts of money like a state pension board or a state school board, when they lose, they are quick to figure out how to undo that loss through extra legal or undemocratic means. In Ohio, sadly, they frankly keep getting away with it. And we've got to get a lot smarter. And our courts, I think, have to be a lot tougher on stopping this stuff before it takes hold, which it's done in Ohio for now a couple of years.
Well, and it's being done in Ohio with the support of local billionaires and national billionaires. I mean, you've got, you know, money from both in-state and out-of-state. Ohio's not a particularly poor state, but coming in to support the Republican Party. And to the best of my knowledge, there's no analog to that on the side, you know, on the pro-democracy side, you know, generally speaking, the Democratic Party, but just more broadly, you know, you've got, you know, like Mark Elias out there and you and a couple of people, you know, waving the flag and fighting the good fight. But God, you guys are running up against people who have literally tens of billions of dollars available to them.
And you know what's interesting is they don't only spend that against Democrats. When a Republican strays, they attack them. So, you know, one of my biggest issues is yours is too, are these universal vouchers that are basically paying private school students to keep going to the school they were already going to and could already afford. Right. Or there were some Texas Republicans from rural Texas who understand that that system is a killer to rural public schools. They voted against the Governor Abbott's plan. And what happened in the next primary? They were attacked by DeVos dark money and knocked out by another Republican. So this big money is not only used against Democrats who often are out of power in these states, it's used against Republicans who dare stand up to some right-wing plan. And the reason they're standing up for that plan is they know the outcome would not be good for their constituents, so they lose as well. So, yeah, it's a real, you know, there's solutions here. I don't want to leave everyone hopeless, but we need more resources. I'm going to try and put something together to try and bring more accountability to those who are pushing for these universal vouchers, for example. But I also think, as I said earlier, when you see these sort of lawless attacks on institutions to undo an election, to hold power, I've been watching, and we see this at the federal level too, like courts are just so slow to bring accountability. So, of course, they're going to keep doing it until they see that they're going to be held accountable. And that's too rare these days, and they're getting away with so much because of it.
Yeah, and to a large extent, you can track this back to Citizens United. You know, Clarence Thomas, the deciding vote, after having been bribed for years by right-wing billionaires to give right-wing billionaires just massive power. I mean, you know, building obviously on Buckley and Bellotti, but and arguably Santa Clara County, but it's crazy stuff. It's just absolutely crazy stuff. And yeah. David Pepper.
Like I said, that dark money is now being used against Republicans who dare stand up to it. And that's what happened just now in Texas.
Which is,
and by the way, it happened in Ohio, too. We had a primary. Some Republicans had worked with some Democrats on some things. Dark money swooping in, attacked them, too.
Yeah.
So it's just to maintain power and to maintain, as we've talked about before, sort of the private interests are gobbling up public resources all the time.
Yeah.
And those billions are spent to keep that going, even against Republicans who stand up to it.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.